I'm Lisa Harrison, and today is Wednesday, the 15th of February, 2012, and today I'm speaking with Brett Stillings. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you, Lisa.
It's nice to be talking to you because I've listened to a few of your interviews over the last couple of weeks, and you're a very interesting man with a lot to say on a lot of different subjects. So I'm keen to have this talk with you.
There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things out there that people need to either be aware of or at least experience once in life.
Absolutely. So yourself and Andrew Basiago have gained a lot of exopolitical attention over the last few months by corroborating each other's stories in regards to both participating in a training program when you were children that involved visits to Mars.
Yes.
So I want to just get a bit more information around that. So it was 1980, I believe, that you went into a training program.
Yeah, I was...
How old were you at the time?
I was at 13 and a half, and it absolutely amazed me when we went a little further down the road that he remembered and that I remembered that he was in my training course back in 1980, around August, September, at College of the Siskiyous near Shasta in Weed County. There's a lot of people that would like that.
So why you? I mean, I believe there was 10 kids in this class, and all of these children had parents who were connected with the military or government in some way.
Yes.
So was it? How can I put it? Was it that they approached their employees who they knew had children, and asked for volunteers, or how did it work?
Well, it kind of had a couple formal moments like that, but when you're, this is why I have so much trouble with, and I try to convey to people, it's, I preemptively say, I haven't been on the radio, or I haven't said this publicly yet, but this is really what is. There was no real formal day. I was literally in training before I knew it, literally. I was going through training in 77, 78, 79. I knew that there was something very exciting there and that I was to be a part of, but it wasn't really spoken that much. It wasn't spoken. It literally was not spoken until you did it.
So what do you mean by training then? What did that look like?
Well, I was going out to the desert a lot, doing, camping with my father. We were spending a lot of father-son quality time, going out to the desert a lot, kind of, as he would say, drying out, and, getting me accustomed to one of the things that he knew I was going to be doing later that I didn't, so I was brought up in studying geology. A lot of my schooling at Pasadena City College is very much almost all geology courses. And I grew up, in making clay pots in the desert, going camping to, Calico.
So it's your belief that your father knew what he was readying you for years beforehand.
Yes, very much so. It actually, I'm getting one of those kind of shameful feels of talking about it actually right now, which is
Do you feel disrespectful to your dad by saying so?
No, he very much later being that departments and whatnot had started falling apart, and there was a lot of confliction and a lot of other things. This is the most friendly, cost-effective way for everyone to come forward. Departments, companies, agencies, and otherwise. It's it's cheaper to come forward than to try and hide it, and that's the main thing in the long run. Give people teleportation. Give people, give the general public, let them go to Paris for 15 minutes. Take a 3-second trip. Go have coffee under the Eiffel Tower. Seriously.
This is what you call jump room technology?
Yes, yes.
So here, I'm trying to imagine you're 13 and a half years old. You know you've been doing some pretty interesting one-on-one time with your dad,
Right.
getting an education that probably a lot of kids your age weren't. Then you find
Right.
yourself in a training facility, in a classroom environment with 9 other children. There's 10 there all up. Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah?
I was actually the youngest in the class. I was the youngest person. The next person my age was Regina Dugan. She's the 19th head of DARPA, first female head of DARPA. I've conversed with her multiple times and remember her very very much so. It's not a, you say remember, it's not a remembering issue, but I very much acquainted with her and uh, very talked with her more so in the group. It was mostly Andy and Regina. Didn't talk with a few others. I was very attached and found a very good um, like connection, as a kid to William McCool, who was the who perished in the shuttle reentry of Columbia back in 2001. I actually remember that there's that day in February, or I'm sorry, of um, that I was working at a company called I'm sorry, it was 2002, I believe. But I was working at a company, a drug testing company called Quest Diagnostics, and that day that we heard on the radio when I was working in the lab, um, in the morning, that the shuttle had blown up, basically. But William McCool was in our class. It was a necessity as a prerequisite, more or less.
Although I want to get back to what happened between 1980 and 1983 in a minute, but let's skip forward to you've done your training, you've done your jump room missions to Mars. There's 10 kids in this class. What happens at the end of it? I mean, are you put through some kind of debriefing? I mean, I'm imagining that
Uh,
you don't spend those kind of years doing
yeah,
that sort of extraordinary stuff, and then it's okay, kids, thanks very much, go back to school
right.
and let loose in the world.
Well, there was actually, I guess there's part of that too, but yeah, there were formal moments of debriefing, whether it was done at home or whether it was done standing in the class with somebody thrusting their fist into your stomach. Um,
Were there attempts to make you forget, more specifically?
yeah, apparently those. Yeah, it was not speak about it. They would. There was one brief incident which was fine, and but Ed Dames, who is the renowned remote viewer
Hmm.
for the military, and I guess other of was our teacher in that class, and there's quite a bit more corroborating things that exist in the world uh, that would corroborate that two people and more so had experienced the same timeline. There's a thing where Ed Dames denies being the teacher of that class, but he was the teacher.
Yeah, I've heard Ed make those statements that he knows nothing about it, basically.
Right.
So here you've got a group of 10 kids. One goes on to, and this is I guess, the most fantastic of the claims, is that one of them was Barry Soetoro, aka
Yeah.
President Obama.
Yes.
So here you've got one child that goes on to become the President of the United States, one goes on to become an astronaut, one goes on to become the head of DARPA. These
Yeah.
are rather illustrious careers. What happens?
Yeah.
What happens to the others? What happened to you?
Well, I did fine, but I incurred a lot of prejudgmental biasness. You might say that those concerned about those issues were creating their own timeline, and that was my contingency. Um, I had very severe interruption in my um, occupation and in my uh, private life, job wise, or as far as employment. I had severe interruption in and people that I applied for. You're fantastic. You definitely have the job. When can you start? I'd say tomorrow or a couple days. They would say fantastic, and all of a sudden they would, they got a call, and in some cases they told me they got a phone call, and he says, "Look, we can't give you the job, blah blah blah." I said, "Well, did you get a phone call?" And they would just kind of nod. Um,
So
and I
people
said,
were deliberately manipulating and messing with your life.
"Yeah, yeah." I was, I was very much at the point, of course. Well, my stomach says I enjoy food, and I kind of, apartments were very expensive in the location I was. There was actually a year and a half waiting area, so residency was not the greatest, highest available thing to me. As far as employment, I will get to the end of it very quickly. Over 3 to 4 years, I learned how to probiotically change my body over a 3 month course, and is actually I actually did feel and learn how to actually break down cellulose a lot at a higher efficient rate than most people. People do break down cellulose, but it's a very minute. You do about 3 to 4 months probiotically and change your makeup a little bit, and you could break down cellulose. And it's not the greatest thing. Your pH goes way down on the urine, and quite a few other things, just not to you know say it too obviously. Incur some health problems.
So is what you're saying that you had health issues that went along with people manipulating and circumstances in your life, and the two combined.
Yeah, cause and effect. It's just momentary, discomforts or whatever. But long term, I mean, this went over a 3 4 year period of no employment, no this, no that.
So you've mentioned people manipulating timelines too, so I'm going to have to get back to that as well. But
Right.
The claim of both yourself and Andrew Basiago that Barry Soetoro was a member of this class and actually has participated in going to Mars. You saw him there on the surface.
Yeah.
The official response from the White House is that, if I'm correct in my understanding, their response was, no, Barack Obama has never been to Mars. Not
Correct.
that the Mars mission doesn't exist, not that Barry Soetoro didn't go, but an individual by the name of Barack Obama didn't go. So they evaded.
They evaded, and they deliberately circumvented the question presented by Andrew Basiago and others, that Barry Soetoro didn't change his name to Barack Obama until about 82, 83. Maybe a little bit after. He was Barry Soetoro in class. I sat next to him, literally next to him, on his left-hand side. It was common that you didn't really sit next to people in class, that you kind of spread out. And when in class, I guess the psychology of that was that Ed Dames was the teacher of the class was your focal point.
Mm.
And so I sat in the Barry Soetoro sat stage left of the classroom, or to Ed Dames' left, and I sat just to Barry Soetoro's left, just one row to his left, one seat behind him, and I did that for a couple days. Everyone knew him as Barry Soetoro. He introduced himself, or was talking with Andrew Bishago out in front. And before I met him in class, he very much said Barry. And he did, in fact, because it was an unusual sounding name, and I was 13 years old and grew up in a very secluded private neighborhood in La Cañada, near JPL and Lockheed and all those places near Pasadena. He spelled his last name for me, and not forget that. I remember when he said that. I remember what order they were introduced. I remember Regina Dugan's goofy laugh, and she really did have a goofy laugh.
Has the White House or Barack Obama officially acknowledged that was his name? That he used to have that name and he changed it to Barack Obama?
He did. I don't know. Have you heard him ever contest it?
No.
Yeah, neither have I.
I haven't heard him acknowledge it either. I was just wondering.
Yeah.
So, were they looking for kids that had any particular abilities? Strengths
yes.
in any area? What were they?
Yes. Large, wide collection of different types of talents. I honestly, I don't know. I mean, that's a lifelong question. I was, there were certain things I could do as a kid that I couldn't do going through puberty. And in fact, one of my expressive ways of saying it is my IQ was over 170 on both versions, as it was said to me when I was about 11 or 12, and when I hit 13 or 14, it dropped below 120. So, I mean, you have variables of whatever when you're a kid. I had certain talents that I was learning privately with my father. Was that I was learning actually how to push objects from, say, 5 or 10 feet away. One of the things that I would do was either coffee cups or ashtrays. And at one point, my dad noticed that I could do the ceramic kind of coffee cups, the one kind of made with or granular, like made out of clay, and have a lot of inclusives in it, as opposed pushing an ashtray. And he would set me in sort of a certain way to where I was kind of disabled, or kind of raw, not properly not developed where I was actually at. And it was common knowledge that I could push objects away from me, but I had very difficult to pull objects towards me. That was very difficult for me at the time. It doesn't really make a difference now.
Does your dad have those abilities?
Yeah, I found, yeah.
Okay.
Very much so.
Fair enough. So, how long were you in training for? It started in 1980.
Well, actually, my first teleportation experience was in 1979, and that was out of Silmar to someplace in the desert. I say someplace in the desert. Because I have no clue where we were at. I don't know what state we were in. I do notably remember that I had to go to school the next day, and that it was an 8 to 9 hour drive back. Best way I can assess it was that we were driving a 1976 camper, and anything really over 65 miles per hour wasn't practical. And you got to keep in mind that the speed limit back then was 55. Out in the desert, it was 65 or 60.
So they teleported you one way?
Yeah, well, you could teleport both ways, but the whole point of that was acclimating me to to teleportation with my father. My father was obviously doing something important, and he. I also been told later on not to get specific on dates when I do this, but not by Andy or not by anybody. It was preemptively. It's just stuff you know.
Is your father still alive?
I'm not going to comment. I'm sorry.
No, well, the reason I ask is, have you had the opportunity to have conversations with him as an adult and clear some of that stuff up?
Always. There's contingencies with that. Mm-hmm. It's the way that you're established is you just go back and go, you just go do your own day, go turn on the sprinklers or go fix the yard, and you forget. you've already dealt with it. It's people say, well, you knew then. It's like, yeah, but you just forget. You ask people, have you ever been on a round vehicle or seen a gray? Then they're like, no. And then a couple seconds later, they're like, well, some girl was like, yeah, actually, and it's like, well, how do you forget that? Isn't that kind of impressive or something? Well, yeah, it's just, you just forget. There's no explaining it. And I honestly can't, not that I've ever contradicted or anything. I just, want to put that out there that that's just fact. My father, over a 20-year period, a lot of the great things was he asked me what Mars was like, what I saw there, and one of the very first things that I did, and I did this in front of Courtney, and Courtney Hunt, was that I actually tasted the soil on Mars, that I ate it, and he just kind of like pulled his head back a little bit and just like kind of looked at me, and just went on, outside, and I said, this is a big moment for me, and then he kind of like gave a little bit of attention, like whatever, and then he went back outside. He spent like half a second, which for Courtney was actually very nice.
So Courtney, this was another kid in your group.
No, he was much older. He was much older than us.
Okay.
He was in his 50s. I contended with Andy. I'm like he was like 40, and Andy like kind of brought me through it. It's like, well, can you see his face? And I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, what do you see? And what do you see? And I'm like, oh, he has a couple scars on his face, and yeah, he's wrinkled, or he's wrinkly, and his hair. I was kind of filling in the blanks, out of discomfort. That he was really kind of beat up. I mean, he had scars on his face, and when you're a kid, you just kind of Photoshop that to yourself.
Mm.
When you remember things, you don't remember pain really. You just don't. And so discomfort. So back in the 80s, kids were very sensitive.
Sounds like remembering childbirth. You forget about the pain factor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I'm sure you had a few thoughts where the husband was pinned to the ceiling, bleeding profusely.
So why kids for this program, and why civilians, and why both?
Well, I think it started out very much the way Andrew Basiago said, was that when they were going plasma confined back, time traveling back to say around Gettysburg Address, or back to the 1800s, was that that adults couldn't do it, or most adults couldn't do it, because they would collapse the field. Their belief system, their personal experiences, whatever, would collapse the field, and they wouldn't be able to experience that non-local event.
Mm-hmm.
And
so purely the psychological state of children, the openness.
Yeah, kids see a horse and cart, or a soldier with a gun. That's a horse and cart. That's a soldier with a gun. The adult would be like, would start having doubts, or whatever the whole thing, the whole thing is. Just kind of not, I was just brought up not to question it. It just is, and that the kids could go through the thing. Kids also had, even though kids have a propensity to talk about things, when they experience it and then talk about it once, like say to a family member, it's all said and done. I mean, they go on a couple months, a year, not even think to talk about it.
Mm.
You lived it.
So what were your tasks? What was this?
Well,
the job description once you got there.
Well, my father was handling that. That was all the geology courses. What was Mars like? What the terrain, what I saw. I said, it's pretty much it was like Earth. It's just the same thing. And it took us a while to assemble what it smelled like. but it took me about 20 years or no, I'd say about 10. It took me about 10 years, but it wasn't brought up again for another 10 years until about 2002, 2003. And I think my dad was trying to remind or to tell me why I was having certain troubles socially and otherwise, employment wise. And so it was, but it took it took quite a while. But I finally assessed it when I was working in automotive when I was sanding down a car, for the Bondo on it, and the Bondo filler is actually methyl methacrylic or women's fake nails,
Mm-hmm.
Lee nails, and I found that if you burned the women's fake nails, like held a lighter to it and kind of burned it, and then blew out the flame, and then mixed in the aroma of unburned diesel fuel, that's exactly what Mars smelled like. Just slightly subtle, and it had kind of a rottenness, like oceanic rotten, like decomposing smell to it. But it was constant, very uniform, and very subtle. Not so much the oceanic smell, but the kind of the acrylic, or what Andrew said as the acrid smell.
Mm.
Like gunpowdery smell. That's what that was.
So was it desert-like, or was there vegetation?
No.
Was it?
There was a little on one of the trips that I did that was specifically focusing on those type of things. But it was just mostly you really couldn't until you'd gone a few times. There was always something that there were small, tiny, like little desert plants, just a couple inches high, here and there, usually under rocks. The ground was like a powdery, kind of darker. Well, the clay near the wineries near San Diego.
I'm in Australia, so no.
Oh. Well, there's a typical red clay that the Indians used in America, and it was just slightly darker than that, and kind of had kind of a moist feel to it, but there was a very it was mostly clay in the area that we were at, and there was a powdery layer of clay, and it compact, and when I tasted it, I knew it was clay. That was one of the happy things that I could report back to my dad about, and that it was definitely clay, and he kind of gave an affirmative that it was clay, and that was very right, and that I was doing good with that, and he kind of.
So in that instance, you weren't telling them something they didn't already know.
Probably, right. More than likely, I was, which kind of bothered me. It was kind of hard to think about on a on a psychological level. I was in routine, but I don't want to analyze that. That's like really uncomfortable to analyze that.
Okay.
It was I don't mean to yeah, but yeah, I was in a training exercise. I established that that was clay, and my dad had some extracurricular questions that are not so extracurricular, but who was there, and there was a guy that was there, that Zandy, and a few others, and
so these are people that would debrief you when you got back from each trip.
Yeah, I would debrief. I think they had trouble when other people would do it. I wouldn't interact with them.
So they had your dad there?
Yeah, my dad was my controller. My dad, at times, I would hear them talking, and he said, "Well, he's doing what he's doing what he's supposed to do. He's not talking to anybody. So get off it."
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so yeah. I mean, but that was back 2000, 90, what was it, 91, 89.
When you land on Mars, is there a facility there for you to go to?
Yeah, there's a structure. There's a facility that's basically a concrete structure. It might be partially in the ground. The front part was sticking out, but the whole back half was above ground. So it was kind of on a mesa or like it had a ravine to it, but the top part of the mesa kind of there was no dirt or soil, so the rest of the building underneath was showing. That was actually had a couple of balconies front and back.
So each of these visits, how long would you be there for? Was it a matter of minutes, hours, days?
Hour and a half, 2 hours was about the max.
And
You would start to get a severe migraine. I would start
oh.
to get a headache after about 20 minutes.
And the facility that you would go to presumably was manned.
No.
So it was just an empty. You guys.
Yeah. When you were there, you were that person.
So there was no one there on a more permanent basis manning the facilities?
No, not really. No, not at all.
Okay.
In fact, when you were there, you were there. I mean, when you got there, you're pretty much the only person there unless somebody had gone before you or showed up after.
Did they ever send you on your own, or you always went in pairs, or?
Oh, I went on my own. There was a very specific law to the El Segundo one, and that was supposed to be a step up from what I remember. But no more than 2 people were ever allowed to teleport in the elevator, ever. There was an air issue.
I mean, 13-year-old kids can be still scared of walking down a dark street by themselves. How is a 13-year-old kid supposed to be on a different planet by themselves?
Yeah, you do it. I mean, still, you're in Australia, so your version of that might be swimming in the ocean in North Australia during March or April.
Well, there are some things you just don't do.
That's right. Mine's the walking around in L.A. Past 11 or something, or being on say on a certain bus or something. But yeah, exactly.
So you're okay with wandering around on Mars on your own, but
yeah,
LA after 11 is a bit of a different story.
One of the most annoying things about Mars was that the reptilians were being pushy at the time, so they were wanting to include themselves in doing the head count for people. One of the things that most people don't know is that reptilians like to play a lot of games. Greys like to play games, but it's fun.
So there was a reptilian and a grey presence.
Yeah, Gray. There was quite a few. One time with the Gray on Mars, that was he was actually on top of the bunker, on top of the structure, and Andy saw that, and I think that the Gray, being that we were in a different location, couldn't illusion that I couldn't see him. So I ended up seeing the Gray on top of the structure, and he was like started to crouch down when I looked up, and then couldn't, and then motioned towards some the other people, Andrew or Courtney, and I think that was kind of like a little trick or something. But couldn't illusion that or didn't get the frequency quite right with me, and inadvertently saw the Gray observing us.
So what was their attitude towards these human visitors?
Beautiful. They were. I'm sure he was babysitting on some level. Always.
Okay.
But looking out after and.
What about the reptilians? What was their attitude towards you guys?
Well, kind of egotistical, really. They would, wait until you're there and then count you. Depending on what thought you produced or whatever, or what they thought you produced. They would they had a tendency to play the chasing game, which was they like to play games, really. They like to kind of create an upset, you might say.
So is either of these races or any other that you may have come across indigenous to that planet?
Well, yeah, there was people coming back from Mars that in all fairness and trade, were visiting Earth. That was 83, 84, 85, or somewhere after the jumps and stuff.
You mean humanoids?
Yeah, as Andrew said, people from Mars that you really can't distinguish from us. Their stomachs are slightly different, kind of. You might say elongated, kind of.
But you're saying they're indigenous to that planet.
Yeah, yeah. There's very much a family that my father knew that we were at the beach, and we take a trip. We took a trip there, and they drove up, and you know in a car, and we met up with them there, and I didn't, I just at the time I thought they were passerbys, but there were people that my father was working with, and but it literally took 15 minutes to convince the guy that it was safe to go in the water. They were with somebody. They were with a person that was that you knew was local or from Earth, and there was a gentleman, what you would think his wife, and there was somebody else, but I don't think that they were with the group. But we spent half a day with the. I didn't see the third person or the fourth person from that point on, but there was the man and the wife, or the lady that was there, but it literally took him my father 15 minutes to literally convince him, until my father was like, "Get in the water," and I was like, it was cold, and I started coming back, and he put his hand on my back, and that was all right. And I started to walk towards the water, and then I was just kind of picked up and thrown in. and and I was I don't know what he was doing, but he was pretty much convinced that it was all right to go in. But it was absolutely unheard of to him that you could go in the ocean safely.
So do you think they were here permanently? They were living here on long term, or was this?
Yeah. Well, apparently you don't go swimming in the ocean on Mars ever.
But there is an ocean on Mars.
Yeah, there's oceans. It's just not as specific like on Earth. It's not it's a smaller ocean.
Okay.
But there's oceans on Mars.
Wow.
It's just common. You look at the pictures. You don't get that color uniformly. Just
Right.
And it's definitely not NASA's 8 millibar out of 1,000 millibar. I mean, you're foreign, so you're not American, so you understand the metric system. 1,000 millibar is 1 bar or 1 atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here in America, they don't seem to get it. You say 8 millibar, nobody in America is like, well, what does that mean? Well, it's like 8 out of 1,000. 1,000 millibar, 1 Earth atmosphere, 8 millibars in near perfect vacuum, if you could achieve such a thing. Unless you're using cryogenics and spend a couple days, But 8 millibar out of 1,000 is ridiculous. I mean, that's what NASA for the last 35 years have stated Mars's atmosphere to be. And there's, I didn't, Andrew didn't wear any suit. I didn't wear any suit. I wore pants and a shirt to Mars. We had a respirator. The atmosphere is around 890 millibar. If you're in craters or in that really deep, Grand Canyon, 2 miles deep, Grand Canyon, the atmosphere goes over, 1,000 millibars, very Earth atmosphere. If you had a parachute the size of the United States, would not slow a lander or a rover down from reentry at 8 millibar, not even over the course of 20 hours.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's just ludicrous that the people have been snowed so much. I mean, 21st century. I mean, anyone could do the basic math on that.
Well, I guess that's why the education system is what it is, to dumb everyone down so that we go, oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
I
Then
don't
you have
get
gotta
it.
throw gotta throw lithium in the water and chemtrails and Monsanto and some GMO and
So,
get
can,
all fatted up for the feast.
yeah, let's not go there. Um,
Sorry.
what? So, did it seem to you like it was very much a joint agreement that you guys were there, the Greys were there, the
Oh
reptilians were
yeah,
there, everybody was working together,
yeah,
and
yeah,
the indigenous humanoids from Mars?
yeah. It was all. It was absolutely just all fair. The Greys came up to basically the government or whomever and said, "Look, the government was, Andrew Bishago and someone coming forward have been speaking about that there's certain variations, certain trips that were taken, and it's because it was the thoughts that I didn't ever process or wasn't to concern myself with. But there's certain aspects to certain trips that were taken, certain hologram training purposes, very much to the point to where you witness your own arm being bitten off or pulled off your body.
Hmm?
And then psyops games, basically, mind
Okay.
games. And it gets very dark. It's a very dark arena, and I don't like going there, honestly. But
So, were you
there's
ever, excuse me, were you ever officially employed by the government or the military?
yes, yes, I made Navy lieutenant at a very young age. That was declared to me when I was about 22 or 23 years old.
What do you mean declared to you?
Well, they had to wait for my body to catch up so I could look the part before I got my picture taken and wore the uniform. But by all rights and by all definition, I became a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy. And by all rights, I am a lieutenant.
What do you mean by you had to wait for your body to catch up? You've lost me.
Well, few lieutenants make it with somebody that looks to be 14 years old.
Are
Even
you
when
saying you were really 14?
when I was 22 years old, I still looked like basically a 17-year-old or a 15-year-old. So there was, certain things that had to be circumvented. But I'm officially made lieutenant when I was 14 years old. My father said so. He said I outranked him almost. And then he kind of swatted my shoulder. Don't you believe that shit? Sorry.
So, what were your official duties or your official role in the military then?
That was I at the whole point I just learned to stop asking questions. It's like yeah, I didn't ask the point. You stay there until you're noticed. Stay there until somebody sees you. And
Is this why you were going to Mars? You're talking about?
yeah. The government, basically the Greys came up to the government and held our own rules to us, which infuriated the government. So basically, there's a catch-22, but not really catch-22. We got we went to Mars as civilians, and we're civilians. We went to Mars as a colonization program.
So there had
And
to be enough Earth humans on Mars
to qualify.
to qualify to have any kind of claim of right over the place.
That's right. By our own rules and as very fairly instigated and regulated by the Greys. By all rights, it is just as fair as people from Mars visiting Earth. And there was a very big program at the time that I've simply not really allowed to talk about, but there's a family, like the family story of people visiting and getting them accustomed to Earth, all the goofy things. One of the coolest things that they absolutely loved was the shoes. No joke. And it was pretty neat that the variety was that the shoes are much more comfortable or higher technology like as far as other things, like you have things that produce boundary layer effects and stuff, like certain clothing or whatnot. There's a lot of technology. But on a personal level, I mean, if people want to research this, they start looking around, look back in records around 82, 83, 90, 91, and look at some of the shoe outlet stores like Target or Walmart, and pick like the worst type of basic cheapest shoe that you could think of or find that nobody in their right mind would ever wear, and those shoes will have the highest sales. And
What are you saying? That they're buying them up and taking them to Mars?
well, I'm saying with a lot of different certain things that had to be provided, certain like basic military or governmental outfits or whatnot. Shoes were actually a big part of, or certain things were actually a big part of that basic provision. And I mean, and those kind of, those were like just kind of there if you needed it. I don't know where you would go for that, and I didn't have that experience at all. I'm sure there were some facilities and stuff, but there was basic clothing that were provided. Just think about the cheapest thing that you could possibly buy at Target or Walmart, and really, I mean, the sales are, 20 times of anything else, in volume, an unheard of volume.
Okay.
Being that there's really only 200 million or 500 million people in the United States. 2 million people on Mars, whatever. Something much bigger was going on to far off places. So.
Did you say 2 million people on Mars?
About, I was told around 2004, 2005, and I'm not sure what it was I was told or what I heard, but it was either 2 million or 20 million on Mars.
Of indigenous.
Yeah, of overall people.
Of overall. That includes the Greys and the reptilians and whoever else has got a presence up there. Okay.
Yeah, basically what the planet could support.
So I've heard you made mention of a childhood friend by the name of Sam.
Yes.
I'd love to know more about that because Sam sounds interesting.
Sam is a Grey that I periodically see, play with, or interact with. People might, play like just childhood friend or whatever.
Was he with you because? Okay, look at it from my perspective. What I'm looking at here is there's a kid who's picked out of a couple of 100 million to be part of a secret space program to go to Mars. That same kid also has a Grey as a childhood friend. That's another one in a couple of hundred, I mean, keeping it to the United States, a couple of 100 million chance.
Hmm.
Are the two connected? Because otherwise it's an extraordinary coincidence.
Yeah. Apparently there are those groups of people with better technology and more insight that see that apparently I was slated or to be a part of a very big thing later on in the future, which is basically what we're experiencing now.
Right, so the Greys knew that you were going to be one of the kids picked to be in this Mars program, and so they made contact with you early.
Yeah.
And befriended you.
Yeah. Well, Sam was, Sam would just periodically show up at whenever, we'd be on a camping trip, and he'd be in the car, 5 hours into the trip.
He just popped into the back seat.
I guess I don't know what he did, but that's basically it. And I honestly can't think back that far if we had stopped at one time or whatever we did. But it was generally he would just be or whatever. He'd just be there.
So not only in your presence, other people saw him then.
Yeah. cameras. And yeah, very much so. He he was just somebody I grew up with. I mean, Sam was Sam. Sam was Sam.
Do you have photos of him?
I'm not going to say anything.
Can you secretly send me one?
Got it. There is an interesting photo album that exists.
Oh.
It's you got to be very careful because they could go back and backtrack and find the angle and research and blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden things start disappearing. So there's a lot of interesting things. Sam would be out in the desert. I remember there was one kind of discomforting thing, but it was a group. But apparently, I guess we were out in the Area 51 area, and you go on camping trips. I'm either asleep in the back or have my head down studying. No clue where we're going, but we're always in the Mojave and always in the deserty areas. I guess I was about 11 because I wrote like a history. What was it? I wrote it. What was it? Was it a history class, or it was about? I wrote a history thing, or not a history thing, but a biology thing, and it was a we're driving at night. It was whatever time it was, nighttime. And Sam was I guess in the back or over my shoulders, like just doing what he does, or whatever, and I'm doing my kind of report, but my dad says get up front, and I got up in the front seat and stuff, and it was about 20 minutes later. We're off the road, off the asphalt. We're on a dirt road, and we had the bright lights type thing, which was off a little bit, but it was on us, and said don't get out of the car. And my dad gets out of the car, and he's standing there, and it's basically an encounter, but Sam's in the back, and things mellowed out kind of real quick. My dad was tense, and then he was like just going with it, and then kind of blanked out. He didn't really blank out, but I knew he was taking a stance to where he was being passive, and deliberately so. He would just kind of stand there, and there was one, but basically two, and then a few that were just standing in front, and they kind of had a comfortable feel. And then I felt somebody that wasn't Sam, but it was taller, and was over my right shoulder. And
still in the car? You're still in the car?
No. Actually, I'd got out of the car and was standing by the car, and I kept like prompting the thought that I'm not going to move from the car. I'm not going to move from the car. And I got this sensation on my right shoulder, and he asked, what's inside. So it felt all right. So I opened the sliding door, and said, "There's a gun underneath the seat, but we don't use it." And he says, "I know." He said, "Thank you for telling me." And he says, I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Do what you want to do." And I sat on the floor, and I know I got motioned by my father for my attention, but right when I started to, I blanked out pretty hard. And when I looked up again, my father was in full animation conversation, like, "Yeah, we're just going to go straight down the road." And he said a few other things.
To you, or to
who he's talking to, basically Greys or military officials. But I think the Greys were kind of serving as security out in the area, honestly.
Oh, so there was military there as well.
Yeah, best equipped. I mean, really.
Okay.
I mean, they could show up on the scene faster than anyone. And I mean, that's just bottom line. If you're gonna interact, it might as well everyone just do it right.
So did you see Sam as a friend?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sam is a friend.
Is he still in your life?
Uh-huh. A couple times. Not mostly out when I was out in near San Diego area was daily. There was also some other things that were present, but that was basically training exercises of how to interact with people and not eat them.
They were using you, or Sam was using you to train others.
Well, yeah, there's those other
yeah,
those other things than gray,
right?
And that I was over I guess pushy with that, but Sam was basically he's a gray. He throughout my life had gotten a little taller and then shorter again. I didn't really put two and two together until about 2005.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I was interacting with different sorts of grays. Sam was Sam. Even though the consciousness was exactly the same, and everything was the same, the whole interaction. Perceptually, being that they can illusion, it's very hard to tell. But Sam is Sam. He gets taller and shorter later on in stories and stuff, and throughout my life. But I used to basically the first consideration was I learned to take a bath, not bathe for 3 or 4 days, which was pretty easy for me as a kid. Sister would let me know how much she absolutely loved that I didn't.
Typical teenage boy then, yeah?
Yeah. It's I'd get the buckets of water outside often. But a lot of it was deliberate. My father would have me not take a bath for 3 or 4 days to kind of culture some things, and part of the consideration for others would be that I would go take a bath, and I'd go take a bath. I would not use any soap of any kind, and it was preferred that I cleaned out the bathtub, which really sucked. That was actually very efforting, and I remember just for everything that I was doing, it was just too much to do at the time. Lazy kid. But I would go take a bath, and I would keep the water cooler than I liked, and I'd put my bacteria in it, and I would get out, and Sam would get in and absorb the nutrients. My dad wanted to see if he could absorb, the nutrients, and it was congenial.
So this was a tonic for him, a tonic bath, basically.
It was bacteria. It was nutrients, basically.
Brett's health spa for greys.
Yes. Absolutely. Yep. And I was to do that and keep that in mind, to be considerate of others, people that were in the family. And
so did he not eat in the traditional sense of the word?
He liked peaches. He liked peaches and literally bananas. My dad would make a slush of bananas and peaches, and he didn't like mango so much, but he was fond of peaches. My father was like, well, isn't it hard? And he said, oh no, he was saying that it wasn't. And
did he speak to you with words, vocally, or did he telepathically?
Not really. Sometimes it would come out good. Sometimes it would be different sounding. But there was most of the time it was very quick answers, which I could never keep up on, which was very frustrating. My dad would usually answer before I would start to ask something, and Sam would do that, and I would get frustrated and upset and tantrum. So I was the fifth wheel that would slow things down a little bit. And basically it was congenial because we needed to slow things down quite a bit.
So did you and Sam hang out just one-on-one?
Yeah. Yes.
And what would you do together?
sit, pick up, we did a lot of things in the garage. Um, but actually, Sam, we had a TV in the garage. One of the garage sale ones that we'd pick up at a garage sale, and Sam was picking up the TV with a flash gun, and he hit the middle button, and he picked up the TV and put it over on the concrete on the floor in front of the workstation that was up against the wall. And my father was just getting out a hey, all happy about it. And my father said, let's plug it in to see if it works, and he was kind of grinning. And Sam was, it'll work, it'll work, nothing wrong with it. And it plugged it in, and there was no working. Sam looked up like to question if my father was telling the truth, and he kind of like looked at him. My dad was kind of giggling, and he said, "No, it was. I plugged it in before you got here. It was working. It produced." He's like, my dad was like, not mad at you, and Sam was like kind of like taking a position like what. And he says, here's what happened, I think. I think when you picked it up, you bent the emitter on the inside, the end of the tube, and bent it. And Sam got it right away. And, I was still kind of thinking about it. And so I think about a couple weeks later, or a month later, it was tried again. And we learned that if you take the flash gun and you want to pick up the TV or pick up a TV, you would go in through the front of the TV and then spread out to the glass to the outside and pick it up that way. Inadvertently, when he picked it up, the metal was different frequency or different, whatever than the glass. And it inadvertently bent, the electron emitter for that TV. So it wasn't, it made it dysfunctional, basically, but that was something that we learned.
So is that a weapon that he had, that he carried with him?
Well, yeah, I guess it could be considered, but it's a device. It's a helpful device. It's great for melting holes in mountainsides or hills. If you want to produce a river of rock, then yeah. If you want to do the classic Star Trek thing and heat up a rock for like heat, that works very well. When I was 11 and 12, I wasn't allowed to see that, because apparently my father didn't want to contend with me getting all excited and happy and nagging the hell out of him, I think.
When he used the laser. Yes.
Yeah, but it was what I saw and got hit with a lot when I was 7 years old.
What's your earliest memory of Sam then? How young were you?
7 years old.
So that was 7. Okay.
Yeah, I saw an event that was somewhat unsettling. There was I was out in Maryland. I was in Bowie, Maryland. I knew there was a gray, which turned, I didn't remember this until later. But Sam technically didn't come into my life about 12 or 14. But was very much there, and these thoughts were very much blanked out. Was that a gray had flashed what turns out to be a reptilian later, but the person was about like my height or whatever, just a little taller, like a neighborhood kid, 4 or 5 feet tall. But when he was flashing, that person became like very much taller, adult-sized and taller. And there was a lot of big white flakes around, like it was snowing, but huge flakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that was when I was on the ground, and I could hear the screen door slamming open, and I was picked up and rushed inside, and my dad was profanity, stay the F away from him, and there was that, but that thought took forever to remember. That was with Andy, talking with Andy recently type thing.
There's speculation, I guess, on one part, but then others are convinced of it, that
Yeah.
a grey interaction happens through genetic bloodlines.
Yes.
So that you've had the experiences, your father's had the experiences, and chances are your grandfather or grandmother, and this has probably been going on for generations. Is there any information in your family to suggest that? Or is it only you and your father that you know of?
Me and my father, really. Everyone was teaching everybody something. We were teaching Grays, kind of the goofed up system that we live in, and what people do and don't like. And we were also learning how to be receptive to what the Grays were doing, as far as keeping us safe to ourselves and keeping people from being a danger to themselves. Honestly,
but there's lots of different types of Greys, isn't there? I mean, we hear about these biological. I guess they're like clones. Some are like animated robots. Some are organic.
Yeah, Sam Gray was more of the clone Gray. The very fatherly figures are very much the tall Grays, 7 foot. That absolutely that I loved on a personal level. That was just a couple times, but mostly the Sam the Gray is basically what would be termed as the hybrid, or the clone, the worker type or clone type. But Sam's a person, and that's just bottom line.
So the 7 foot tall Greys, they're organic in the sense of they're not test tube made or anything like that.
It doesn't matter if they were. I mean, they're we have people on Earth that were born out of a test tube.
Sure, but we're not. It's not the practice. Right. It's not how most of us come into the world.
Right. The taller Greys have cancer problems, or they have this type of problems. Sam later on, very very ironically, after 1997, would not eat peaches.
Oh.
So
do you believe that they're all
some
benevolent towards us, or malevolent, or it's a combination?
Yes, more or less. I got into a discussion on the radio that actually, and this is very much true, is that people that have had bad experiences with Greys either emotionally didn't handle it too well, and they misappropriate their feelings, or they were handled very roughly, and it basically, the bottom line is the kind of insectoid type of Grey, with the kind of the distorted praying mantis type head
and the very long limbs.
Yeah, they're really a no nonsense kind of get the job done type, and they're not mean or sadistic. They're just it's you feel pain, but just get over it.
So are all? I mean, I guess in the conspiracy world, we're told that the Greys act as the workers for the reptilians. Really, that they're
No, I don't believe that. And the Greys might. I mean, you have a clone, or you have a Grey like Sam. That or you have a pushy reptilian, but basically the Greys are the dominant, of course, and we're more sensible. The taller Greys are the ones in charge, and they're very congenial. I mean, really, could things be congenial on Earth like they are, really? I mean, they really couldn't. I mean, it basically boils down to the working example is: would you rather be in a room with a hungry Grey or a hungry reptilian?
Is that a legit? I don't want to be in the room with a hungry anything. Okay. All right. I want to move on to timelines, though. Is there anything else? Is there anything else you want to say about the Greys or about Sam before we move on?
that if he's going to pick up people very soon, actually it was supposed to occur a year ago, is start picking up. um,
Who's going to start picking up who, and for what purpose?
Well, I mean, if people want to go on vacation, if Earth, we'll get into the timelines, but we were on an original timeline until about a year ago, where things started, effects started getting laundering. If you remember about that, the sky 8 months ago didn't look right.
Mm-hmm.
We were being passed dimensionally. The Earth was being passed through, and at times, a lot of round vehicles in the sky were being passed off as stars, and in doing so, effects were being laundered, so we didn't incur a motor interruption during 2012 period, where cataclysms and stuff take place.
Sorry, you've just lost me. I have no idea what you've just said.
All right. Well,
try and put that in simpler terms for me.
All right, we were to incur certain cataclysms, or unavoidable, really, because the Earth is a motor generator.
Right.
And around that 2012 period, that's when all the motors line up again from where they started, and there's a blank spot in the motor. There's the Earth is a receiver of energies and stuff and whatnot, or of things.
I think I know the image that's coming to mind. If I can visualize something, then I can get it. So the image that's coming to mind is like those, like the main calendar image, where you've got the rings that click in. The wheels, the three wheels, and eventually they all get to the point where they get to the exact same spot that they started.
Yeah. Yes.
So when that happens,
more or less, yes, that's
it's a reset
spot. That's a reset on the motor,
and that's 2012.
Yeah, that's where the motor lags a little bit, and certain energies in place are no longer there.
So in that blank spot is when the Earth would experience cataclysm.
It would shrink a little bit.
Shrink?
Yeah, being that you couldn't really have historic in the Bible floods just miraculously out of nowhere occur, unless the water level raised. The only way that the ocean or whatever can raise is if the Earth shrinks. Being that the Earth could shrink, it means it would have to be hollow. You can't compress a solid.
Yeah, well, hollow Earth's another whole other rabbit hole to go down. Yeah.
The prospect of hollow Earth is there. In the center is a gravity generator, and as gravity propagates towards the electron shell, it as so does the gravity in hollow Earth. The shell of the Earth is basically the electron shell, and it's supported up.
Is that in support of the theory that the sun is actually responsible for the gravity on this planet?
Yes.
Right.
I actually one that actually believes that the Earth is a gravity receiver, and gravity tunes to things. It tunes to Earth, and gravity's just operates a little bit differently than what people think. Newton got it closest. I mean, Newton is, basically right on for what he's saying.
So we were on a timeline that led to a reset in December of 2012, where the Earth shrinks, cataclysms occur. But you said a year ago we got pulled into a different timeline. Right.
Basically.
How? And who by? Or by what?
Butts got saved, basically. I don't know if the original timeline is still occurring, and it should. Is that that D.C. is flooded. Washington, D.C., when Andrew Basiago went to 2013 on a jump, was that Washington, D.C. was underwater, about brackish water, about 50 feet of water.
Yeah, I did hear him talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that the mission, his mission was to go check on the state of the Supreme Court building, and that the water was coming up about halfway up the columns, and that he I believe that to be a fixed timeline, is that the Earth was to incur certain things, and basically the way that I assessed it was that it's kind of like the tsunami thing, is that a slight tsunami comes in and pushes the fresh water table up in DC, being that DC used to be 32 feet above sea level, is actually sank below sea level now. Is very much like New Orleans.
Mm.
And that's actually done so over the last 40 years. You can look it up.
Well, it's not the only place. Thailand is sinking.
Yeah, yeah. And what I think happens is that a slight tsunami that doesn't inundate on the DC pushes the water table up higher, and it floods. Or it does a liquefaction.
So who or what would have pulled us into a different timeline?
The Greys, babysitters. They would have they they affected, or the timelines, we're not incurring like the cataclysms that I think we would have incurred. One of them was the Great LA earthquake that I wrote about, that was supposed to occur in 2010, and it didn't happen. We were getting earthquakes right up to that point, and then it just stopped.
When it comes to timelines,
Mm-hmm.
nothing that you had, from what I understand, so correct me if I'm wrong, there was nothing that you did within the military that was related to timelines.
Yeah, but I know what it is,
but your experiences in regards to timelines are personal experiences.
Right.
Yeah? They weren't, like what I'm saying is, it wasn't through looking, through using technology that the military have to look into timelines. This was your personal abilities,
right,
to view timelines.
After about 85, it was just basically word of mouth. It was
and leaked information that's come out of the military.
Yeah, you just learn what's learned or whatever. You learn that you're gonna get married or something, and that's the timeline you're on.
Is it possible that we're all, as individuals, experiencing different timelines on the one planet?
Yeah. Things got a little goofy, and
so how can that? Hang on, this is getting strange. How can, let's say I'm on what we would call the catastrophic timeline, that I'm going to be on an Earth that hits 2012 and cataclysms and whatever.
Right.
And you're not. How can that be? We're both occupying the same planet in the same dimension in such a way that we can communicate with each other. But how can we be on different timelines?
Right. Things fall apart or something, but yeah, I mean, we have to cross-reference information, like what's happened in Iraq, what's happened. Have there been any huge earthquakes in the United States in the last 2 months?
Nothing over 5, I don't think. Or have you?
No.
Maybe 5 pointers, but I don't think you've had anything huge.
Right. That's no. It's There's I don't understand how or why, but apparently that does happen. But I think that's the general consensus why everything's being passed through a dimensionally. It was that certain things didn't occur. I mean, I wrote these down back in 2007 about the earthquake in 2010.
Yeah, I want to get to that, because you're saying something that's confirming things for me personally too, because I felt like I personally switched timelines back in August.
Yeah, August 22nd, 2010. There was supposed to be an earthquake in LA. I saw this. I was told this.
Something big happened at the end of August. And
Sorry.
something big happened at the end of August. I mean, when you think about the climate globally, it was all about Elenin, the fear-mongering about Elenin.
Yeah.
There was so much fear-mongering going on, and that you could literally feel the tension on the
Yeah.
planet build.
Yeah.
And then something shifted literally overnight,
Yeah.
and there was this huge release. And no longer did I personally feel any connection to all the fear-mongering, to all the disasters, to all the cataclysms, to all the, there was, every time I saw a piece of news or I saw any information on what's supposedly going to happen, there was a complete disconnect. I just knew it wasn't
Right.
anymore. And I
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
the only one to feel that, I know it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. And my father talked about in 2006 about what I was writing about, and I was having to guess, and it wasn't. And he was referring to about the 2007 article about the 2010 earthquake, and and that I told him I wasn't going to write about it. I told I'm not going to go against my word and write about it or say anything. Everything's private. And he says, he said, Dad's not yelling at you for talking. You do later on. There's a reason. And I was like, oh, I'm like, right, sorry. And he says, keep us apprised of what happens. And I'm like, yeah, I'll try. I'll do my best. It's there was supposed to be a earthquake in L.A. in August 22nd
Of
and that
2010 or 2011?
2010.
Okay.
And that was supposed to happen. That was fixed. That was a key point. I mean, I've been discussing that since 2003 with my dad.
So in
And
2007, you wrote about the tsunami and earthquake that was going to hit Japan in 2011.
yeah, and affect the nuclear reactors. That was
And the nuclear reactors, yes. Now
July.
you've had that posted online since 2007, haven't you?
Yes, yes, that was on my MySpace on Will under Will Edison. And
Is it still there?
yes, it still is. In fact,
So William Edison?
yeah, Will the Edison Man on MySpace.
Is there anything up there now that people can go and have a look at that you've written about that you still expect to happen?
Well, yeah, but we won't write about those. It's everybody either does really good or there's a lot of wallets and pants and shirts and shoes with a lot of big white flakes laying around. But that's a negative. We won't talk about that.
I can honestly tell you I have no idea what you just meant by that.
It's the not so good option of things. It's
So you think we've gone into more and more positive timelines?
yeah, it's something. Here, to give you an idea, here's one thing that to give you an idea. Back in 1983-84, Andrew Pishago came over to the house when I was a kid, and we were living there, and it was the one time that I wasn't allowed to go in the backyard until I saw the goat in the backyard, and we had ducks and geese in the backyard at Ocean View. One of the very unusual things was that there was a goat back there, and the dogs were barking and trying to get up to it, and there was a little bit of tension. And my dad went outside and put it up to the tree up on the second story of the lawn. And Andrew came over and was talking with my dad and stuff. And I was trying to eat cereal. I was having a bowl of oatmeal actually. And they were getting ready to go out and back, and I was just getting ready to tail behind. My father said, stay inside. You're stay indoors. And it just kind of caught me off guard. And so I stayed up, and I stayed inside, and Andrew and Dad were talking. They went up. They had my dad had a flash gun, and they went over to the tree, the pine tree in the back where the ducks and geese were. And I opened the sliding door. I said, "Do you want me to come outside?" And he yelled, "No, you stay in there. You don't want to see this." And so I went into the living room or into the family room and just sat and listened to some music. But bottom line is when they came back in, they were talking in the kitchen, and I went out back, and the goat was gone. There was a lot of big white flakes. Basically, if you return the hydrogen in a human body back to a time domain, or say you reduce the World Trade Center steel turns to dust, so that iron gets returned back to a time domain or to an energy domain. The leftovers were the metals or the carbon and nickel in the steel. As does when you flash gun somebody, the hydrogen gets returned back to a time domain. Even though oxygen's a rotor, it just disappears. What's left over is the electrolytic metals or the metals of the body, and they appear as big white flakes. So basically, I think what Andy did, and Andy corroborated that he flash gunned they killed the goat and flash gunned it, and it was actually one of the styles that Andrew hadn't ever been able to see before, but I had. Are you there?
Yeah. You kidding?
I just clicked and I'm like, oops.
No. Okay, so Andrew Bashago participated in, disintegrating a goat.
Yeah, he flash gunned it. He hit the smallest button, the farthest button, and
there's a timeline
little button
where you see something similar to that effect happening on a mass scale to humans. But we're not we've possibly left that timeline though.
Yeah. Is you go for the middle button on a flash gun, then you're saying that you're not being considerate to the person in front. You hit the button closest to you. You basically just kind of stun them or knock them out.
Now, how did you know about the Japanese tsunami and earthquake? And was this information that got leaked to you eventually down the pipeline? Was this a personal experience that you had?
My dad was beta testing me on things, so I wasn't told specifically, but he said that he got confirmation that what I wrote about was correct, and that was on the right path and stuff. He did so actually, and did it retroly actually. He told me that before we discussed about the writing article that I wrote was correct, and he very much did it in the sense what Dad talked about before what applies to that. And I'm like, oh, and he did one of those retro things again.
But how did you know? How did you know?
Well, because I'm used to the game playing stuff, but I freaked out when Andy called me up, and Andy was like, "Brett, did you hear?" I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "The earthquake in Japan." I'm like, "Yeah." He says the reactors. He told me about the whole scenario. I'm like, "Right." I go, "How bad is it?" He goes, "Well, do you remember what you wrote about?" I'm like, "Oh God, yeah." That's right. And I go, that's that. And he goes, "Well, yeah, I know." I said, we corroborate. I'm like, "You remember I showed that to you in 2008? He goes, yeah, I remember." I'm like, "All right." And, people freaking forget or things happen. I'm like, you know this. We have to, we have to like make sure that things are still in place.
So the timeline where the LA earthquake happened was obviously a very cataclysmic timeline. We're not in that one anymore.
Buildings were moved like 20, 30, 40 feet. uh, buildings that were only 10 stories tall fell over, which was the bizarre thing. I mean, it really just doesn't happen. 10-story buildings just don't fall over. No matter really what size earthquake it is.
But if we already shifted timelines so that that didn't happen by August of 2010, the tsunami in Japan was still a more positive timeline than the LA timeline, but still quite devastating for those in Japan.
Yeah, it's horrific. It's still horrific. It's still bad.
So do you think okay, when I interviewed Alfred Weber once, and we talked about timelines, and he put it like, say, a 25-lane highway, and the one that you're on is the one in the middle. It's the most prominent, strongest timeline. And each timeline to the left, for example, each lane over is more and more negative, and as you go to the right, each one you go over is more and more positive. He put it that way. And that we had moved lanes.
Well, that's that's the path more traveled, more positive, and more proven better. Yeah, basically, I was told that I was being told what I was going to write about later, and what I witnessed, and my dad was helping me with the intel. We all knew it was important, and it was important to the point where people that I'd never met before, very preemptively, would meet me at the library, and I would get people, mostly females out in front, that looked like they were either from the company or from FBI or something. They, or something, they have that luck, and they, they say, "What are we going to write about today?" And I was starting to catch on that something was coming up that was very important, and that was a little bit more than just family talk, and it was more universal.
So you would have people, including your father and strangers, come up to you and say, we know that you're going to write an article about X.
Yeah.
But
they
before you'd written it. But where would the information come from for you to write the article? Were they feeding you the information, or were you experiencing something on a personal level?
Very much experiencing, and this is what happened. And I was getting very. My father was having health problems, and I was becoming, you might say, a little bitter at society.
Mm-hmm.
And I was becoming a little bit more emotionally upset, and when I become upset, I also become a lot more focused. It's I was walking down. I was basically told to walk down the street from mystery voice and head. The best way I'd put it. And sometimes you look around and you'll see like someone directing towards you, but it's more like an illusion type thing. Sorry, I'm going to say it like that because that's basically a lot how people experience it. They really think about it. I mean, we've had pictures.
Let me try and get what you're saying. So it's like someone telepathically, in your physical proximity, talking to you and telling you to get up and go somewhere.
Well, I mean, somebody would come up to you, and it's kind of in the terms that that person's there, and but it's more like done as an illusion. I mean, I've seen pictures where of the same instance where I dropped something and was getting like instruction, and somebody would come in from a store and say, they would hear the discussion, and they say, "Well, what did you see?" or whatever. I was talking to somebody in front, right outside, and I was getting an illusion, and they would show me like their security camera that points out front, and the person was actually standing about 30 feet away, and I was being told what I was going to do for the day. So I mean, things get illusioned, and it's not a mental instability of any kind. It is literally illusions. Greys do it very, very well, and and there was two other people around. Like somebody was holding something in front of them, so they were deliberately doing an effect. And I was basically talking to somebody that I thought was in front of me, like 3 feet away, and telling me what I was going to do for the day. And it's you get that kind of gameplay. People either do it academically or whatnot, but it happens, and that's just the bottom line. So, anyways, I walked down the street. I was starting to feel a very familiar effect as when you teleport. So I very specifically and very consciously picked up my pace to where I was going a little bit faster, walking very fast, and not stopping, and we used to goof around, don't run backwards. And one thing you don't do is you don't stop it and run backwards, otherwise you die in a teleporter. It's
So you think you were walking down the street? And,
yeah, I was being advanced forward in time. Sorry, to 2011.
So they have the technology to just zap you into a different time as you're walking down the street.
Yeah, Greys are more prominent to do stuff like that.
Okay.
You float around vehicle above somebody and produce an effect, and put that person in the massless state and time travel. I basically got forwarded in time.
You put it you put it so well that it just sounds okay.
Yeah, that's just what's happening. It wasn't any formality from this point on in 2004. I mean, there's quite a few. I got a remark from. I did an interview with the FBI back in 2004. That was a very lengthy interview that I believe Andrew Basiago has found it almost impossible to get the videotapes to that interview. He knows that interview exists. That interview took place. There are videotapes or video of that interview that he cannot get. And yes.
Well, I'm just thinking. So that, for clarification, the ability to see down timelines is not a natural ability that you have, like a psychic ability or anything like that. It's the Greys.
Well,
actually.
Well, no, there's a very much psychic connection. It's just I don't give it labels. There's things, it's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it very much is. I can, you just, you hear somebody talking. It's not really important if they're moving their lips and expelling air.
No.
It's just more effective and more immediate and more efficient. It's talking the other way to talk. People used to get frustrated when I would say it, like, what does that mean? And I'd give up and just go on to something else. But
I hate to. I mean, I could talk to you all day, but we've been going for nearly 2 hours, and I just wanted to ask you some wrap-up questions, if I can. But I'd love to talk to you again someday because there's so much more to ask you. Are you open for that?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, great.
Sorry. That's great.
Oh, good. Firstly, the ability to teleport. Or the technology to teleport? Do you see if that becoming part of public domain, part of our future technology and transport in the near future?
Very much so. I do think that people would be very responsible, and for the most part, as proven as such. I think there's a lot of groups out there that will try to screw it up to make it not transpire, because they're just little negative control freaks. For the most part, everything that I observed is that people are very reasonable. and very responsibly acting. Um, one of the things was that I was doing so much activity with a lot of things, and also trying to fall into my niche and find out, it's I just when I go to speak about it, Lisa, I can't put it into words, but I know exactly what to do, what function to perform when I'm not speaking it, and
Yeah.
it is just so difficult for me. I don't mean to sound choppy or indecisive or whatnot. It's just very difficult. As I've been, you know, basically programmed to be like that, to be my own worst enemy when speaking. And
In order to not be
but
able to
one of the
share what you
things
know,
was
if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, the formality of having to go to a facility to teleport or to whatever was just completely getting too time consuming and expensive. Is basically I walked down the street. I was advanced to about 2011, March or April of 2011, when I got to the Starbucks and Target shopping area. The blacktop of the whole parking lot was all brand new black retopped, just redone. The next day it was not. It was back to the way, the same cracks, very light gray horrible looking mess that it was. It wasn't a mess, but it wasn't, it didn't look new. Um, the I found out um, in a couple weeks ago that they had redone the blacktop around December of 2010 in that area, that they had resurfaced the complete area of that shopping park.
Hmm.
When I got there, everyone that I knew, and I knew everyone that worked at Starbucks in that area. Not one person was there that worked there. It was all new people. I was just there the previous day. The There was one person that did work there, that I knew worked there, that was sitting out in front having coffee. He had his computer in front of him, and he had the older style iPod from around, I guess, 2008 or so, but it was a white one, and he had it on the table in front of him. One of the things that I hadn't seen before was the newspaper stand that was on the outside. They had it usually on the inside at Starbucks. It was directly outside the window on that left. I went over there and I read the paper. One of the paper was the Japan earthquake, the Fukushima, the nuclear reactors blowing up, and I was just kind of taken back a little bit, like I didn't hear anything about that, and there was nothing on the news, and it was talking about that it occurred like 2 weeks ago. As soon as I started leaving, I didn't approach anybody. I looked inside. The person that I saw was visibly about 5 inches, 6 inches, or taller than he was the other day. It looked weird. He was visibly older and visibly taller. It was, I knew I was experiencing something weird, and I just left it at that. And I took off because I was to go to the duck pond that was across the street. I stopped by a store, the Albertsons, the grocery store that was just down that walk path, but kind of went inside for half a second, then back out, and went immediately to the duck pond. When I started going to the duck pond, I realized what date I saw, and I saw it as 2011. And then I was starting. I knew it was March or April that they were it was either March or the end of March, or it was we know it happened on March 12th, but the paper was around March 30th, or it might have been April. I think there was two dates on it, so it must have been on a weekend.
A weekend paper, yep.
Huh.
Yep.
Yeah, I got remind me to look that up later, to to see what the see if the weekend and the dates match up. Because I'm not making this stuff up. This is all very true. And 'cause that'll be interesting if it is. It's just all that much more or whatever.
But have you actually seen a timeline where this technology is in the public domain? Have you seen it, or you just
yeah
believe that it should be?
Well, I mean, it's pretty public to us. We're experiencing this like every week.
Yeah, but it's not like I can go down to the local hardware store and buy myself one. Or
No. You could go to your local restaurant or liquor store up at Shasta, and there might be something there.
That's not local to me.
Well, you're in Australia. I mean, Australia, there's quite a bit of equipment out there.
Yeah, it'd be all around Pine Gap, yeah.
Is it unreasonable to say that the CIA has kind of made it to Australia right around the 1990s?
Absolutely not, no.
One of the things that I'm really not to really talk about, but I'm forbidden by my father and by everyone else in the industry to go to. I'm not allowed to go to Alice, Australia.
Well, that's where our Pine Gap facility is.
Wow.
So it could be that could be why.
Yeah, I wasn't attributing. I wasn't on the internet much during that period, and I wasn't really attributing it to much. I knew it was industry stuff, but I didn't. I would basically. My father said that if I went there, I'd be shot and killed.
Well, best you don't then.
That they're just a little bit angry at me, I think, but retroly, it's really weird. But
well, I think it was Alfred that was saying that people commute from the US to Pine Gap for work.
Yeah.
It takes them a couple of seconds.
Yeah. I'm not allowed to go near. Just basically, it was stay out of Australia.
The whole country. You can't even come.
The people are great. It's the CIA, the government that's there. They basically had to kick out of America, basically, or had to outsource to another country, and I'm not really ever allowed to touch on that, and I'm not really ever to speak about that. And I'm not. That's my dad. That's a no-no. I can do what I'm doing, but that's a no-no.
All right.
I feel the lightning bolts already.
Well, thank you, Brett. It's been a very interesting conversation.